This lady was looking for me. She looked kind of sickly. She told me that the album changed her life. She said of course, she had cancer, but then she said she actually was thinking about committing suicide because of the treatment and she didn't have the finances to take care of, like medical bills. So she actually wanted to take her life. And when I hear something like that, perhaps the pinnacle of my success, because I felt like if I can release an album that saves just one person's life, thank God that I can make that impact in somebody's life.
Welcome to Distinctly You, where we talk to women who have redefined success at different seasons of change. Today, we'll be talking to JaneliaSoul. She is a Nigerian-American independent artist. She is a published author and CEO of the Janelia Store. How did she go about living out her passions? Well, let's get into the conversation. Welcome, JaneliaSoul, to Distinctly You.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Fantastic. Janelia, I've been really looking forward to our conversation today. And
Yes.
You are a woman of many talents. You are a woman that wears a lot of different hats. I mean,
yes.
You are not only are you a multi-talented independent music artist, you are a published author. You are also CEO of your own store, the JaneliaSoul store. And let's not forget, you are a wife and a mom as well. So when you talk about all these hats, there's a lot to you. So just tell us a little bit about who is Janelia? Who's JaneliaSoul?
It's interesting you should use that verbiage, wear many hats, because I've actually used the same words to describe myself. And Janelia is just someone who loves life and who loves to go after her dreams and who loves family, who loves achieving. Like, I'm a go-getter. And I think in every aspect of my life, whether it's my Shopify store or my music or my family, I'm always very goal-oriented. I'm always like, okay, this is what the next plan is. This is what we're doing next. This is our dreams. This is our goals. This is our plan. So I think I bring that to every aspect of my life for the most part. And that's who Janelia is. That's who JaneliaSoul is, a go-getter, a fun-loving, life-loving person who just feels the need to just accomplish in all areas of life, personal, professional, in all areas of life for the most part.
Well, I have to say, I know that to be true. And you are also Nigerian American.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you bring a lot of that flavor to a lot of what you do. How has your background and your upbringing shaped you to who you are today?
I think it is a very core value of who I am. In everything that I do, you always see the little bit of Afrocentric in it. Whether even in the family, people have a tendency to believe that the Afrocentric just exists in my music. It's what I live and breathe. Like in the house, we speak Yoruba, and we'll make it a point of duty to make sure the kids identify as Nigerian, not American. So it's growing up in Nigeria, and I'm having that foundation of the Nigerian Yoruba culture specifically has pretty much made its way to all areas of my life, and especially family life. Even though, yes, you do sing in my music. Yes, I do sing in Yoruba. I have a new single titled Coco. And yes, on stage, you see it. And even at work, I also have, I'm sure we're going to talk about that. I also have a 9-to-5, and they know that I'm a proud Nigerian. I'm always talking about Nigeria. When I traveled recently, we were supposed to have a meeting to have a triage, and half of the meeting ended up being about the trip, and they were so interested. So being a Nigerian, growing up in Nigeria has always been a part of me in every aspect of my life. And I just can't seem to shed myself of it. It's just always makes its way somehow, it just always manifests somehow, even if I don't intentionally want it to, but it just somehow comes out. And it's who I am. It's a core value of who I am.
Yes.
As an artist, as a mother, as a worker, as in every aspect for the most part.
And that's a beautiful thing. I mean, when you are proud and when you recognize who you are and you do it unapologetically, you live it unapologetically, it always shines through. You just mentioned,
think so, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And I think that's what makes you authentic. And I think that's what makes you very relatable to people of all cultures, to be honest.
Mm,
You just mentioned a little bit about your 9 to 5.
mm,
And because the work you do, especially in the arts, in music and all of that, I mean, you've even done some acting and just you're a
mhm.
true all round artist. It's hard to believe that you still have the bandwidth, and time to
Mhm.
have a regular 9 to 5. So what's that like?
Yes,
What do you
ma'am.
do as a from a 9 to 5 perspective, by the way?
I'm actually a business analyst,
Mm,
and I took some time off while I was building my online store. But after COVID, I realized there was an opportunity to work remotely,
mm,
full time. And that's what I pursued. I specifically interviewed for remote jobs, and I was lucky enough to get it. So it's very flexible. I have to say that. And if
mm,
not, because of the fact that my BA job is remote and offers a lot of flexibility, I don't think I'll have the bandwidth to do that. So I mean, technically I work 40 hours a week, but in actuality, maybe 20, because I work very efficiently. I know how to manage my time. I know how to prioritize. So thank God I've been able to balance that with everything else I'm able to do. So yeah, and I'm enjoying it. I'm loving it. As a matter of fact, if I may, there was actually a point in time that I had two BA jobs. They were both remote. I was working.
wow.
I work for a company both in Maryland and California, but that got really hectic. So I said, you know what, let me just stick to the Maryland job. So yeah, so
Wow.
the flexibility allows me, gives me the bandwidth pretty much, because if I didn't have flexibility, if I didn't have flexibility in that job, I don't think I'll be able to do it I mean, to be honest with you. So yeah, that's why I'm able to do it.
As you talk about flexibility and you talk about being able to like multitask, especially between jobs, careers, professions, I know a lot of people, a lot of women especially, can definitely relate to that. But I'm very
Mhm.
curious for someone who, like yourself, is like I mean, you travel. I mean, you are on the go, on the road. I mean, and you are truly living out your passion. You are actually living out your passion. And you've mentioned that over the years, you've had to maybe have times where maybe you pursued one thing more than the other. How did you make that decision, especially to get your career to where you are right now? So,
Right.
right now, you are balancing a regular day job, as it were, with this.
Mhm.
But do you find yourself in a place where you have to choose? And where there's conflict. And when you've had those situations, how have you made that decision on which direction to go with?
Actually, I have been in situations where I had to make a choice. And I think when those choices are presented to you, you then um, you then have to pretty much just make a decision. For me, when I started building my Shopify store, initially it was just like a side hustle kind of a thing. But then I introduced waist beats to the merch store. I was able to launch some successful Facebook ads, and that just basically skyrocketed my sales. And I was at a point where um, the income, what I was making from my online store was almost triple what I was making as a VA. So in that situation, like I said, when you're presented with opportunities or decisions, I think the decision will kind of like be obvious to you which one to go with, because the scenarios will present itself and you have to choose the best of the scenario. And in this situation, the best of the scenario was that I leave my 9 to 5 because I was making more in my Shopify store. But life, throws you curveballs and you have to just roll with the punches. So after doing that for about 2 years, the Shopify ads weren't as I guess, profitable as they were. So at that time, it was no brainer that, okay, the Shopify store is not doing exactly how it was like 2, 3 years ago. So now it's time for me to go back into the workforce. So now it has returned to just like a nice supplement to my income. But then it's not like the main income anymore. And also, to be honest with you, I also kind of miss working. I felt like I've developed my talent to be a business analyst. And I just felt like I didn't want to lose my talent and the skills that I've acquired over the years. And especially in a situation where the income that I was making from my store wasn't as grand as it was. I was like, you know what? I want to go back to work, and I want a remote job, and I want to work from home so I can process orders in my lunch break and run to the post office while I'm taking lunch, while I'm having a sandwich or something, which is like my life, like 3 days a week, I'm running to the post office to go and drop off shipments while I'm eating a sandwich. So yeah, so I think, to answer your question, yes, yeah, you have to choose. And then I think the choice becomes very apparent based on the different scenarios that you're looking at.
Well, Janelia, for as long as I've known you, and I think our viewers, just so you know, for full transparency, we went to college together. And
we were roommates.
We were roommates for a time as well. So let me just say, we go back.
Yes, we do.
And for as long as I remember, this has always been you. I mean, unapologetically you. I mean, the flair, the style, the color, the culture, the music. This has always been you. And it's so refreshing to just see that live out all these years later. Just the consistency, right? In you being you. But I know it cannot have been easy staying true to who you are, especially in a world where people are always going after you got to do that 9 to 5, you got to do that, get that steady paycheck, right? Yes, there's reality to that, but there are a lot of people who have passions, who have hobbies, who have talents, and they just don't know how to incorporate that into their lives and to live a fulfilled life like you're doing. So, like, what advice would you give that person who, always wanted to write a book? You're a published author. That person who always wanted to learn how to play a musical instrument or whatever. You get what I'm saying? And still be able to be a wife, mom, and do all those things.
Right. I'm going to keep it very simple. What I do is like I said earlier, that pretty much every area of my life, I was assigned goals to it. Like, what is the next step? What are we doing next? So a to-do list, like make a to-do list. For me, because I have so many things going on, I can't function without my to-do list, So make a to-do list and just take baby steps. Just start. Take the very first step. You might not have the exact, step by step or the detailed process to go about this goal or dream or what have you, but just start. Just start with number one, and then as you start, with God's grace and continue to move forward, your path will become very clear to you, and you know, okay, which is the next step? What's the next process? What project are we going to move on to next? So that's what I do. I function by my to-do list. And that's my advice to anyone out there who also want to go after their dreams or their goals.
I think the biggest piece of, and I loved how you kept that simple, by the way, but I think the biggest piece there is what you said in just start. Right? Because a lot of times people maybe we overthink things and it's like, oh, things have to be perfect, but you just have to start. And I'm sure as you do all what you've done, you probably didn't really say, oh, this is how the end goal is going to be exactly, but you just started and you just did it, right?
Yeah, you never really know what the end goal is, because it's one thing to have a dream or a goal, but you never really know how it's going to play out. And that's where, grace and, having a relationship with God comes in. But at least you can have a sketch. You might not have, I'm thinking like an artist, you might not have the detailed drawing, but you can have a sketch and start to work on your sketch. And you might not know exactly what the masterpiece will look like. You might not know exactly all the colors that you're going to incorporate into this drawing, but at least you have a sketch and you can continue to build. And you might be thinking, it's going to be a red base painting or drawing, but then it's a blue base. But at the end, you will have that masterpiece. So yeah, it's very, very important to start and then take baby steps.
I love that. Now, again, just talking about your journey, because one of the things we talk about here on this channel on Distinctly You is about women who have redefined success at different chapters in their lives. So I'm sure in terms of the chapter when maybe you were getting your career off and running, the chapter where maybe your kids were younger and maybe needed you
Mm-hmm.
more, right?
Right.
And now this chapter, what would you call this chapter that you're in right now in terms of with what you're doing in your life and how do you define success in what you do?
Hmm. What would I call this chapter? You know, I think I'll call it just emergent. I don't think I have arrived. Like I said earlier, you start with this, you have this masterpiece you're working on, but you start with a sketch. So I think I'm beginning to introduce all the colors in, but then it's not finalized yet. The painting is not finalized yet, so I'm still emerging. Yeah, I hope I was able to answer that question.
I like that. I like that you're still emerging. And I think that's a
Mm-hmm.
very beautiful yet humble response because I think anyone that feels like they have arrived does not leave room for growth because we should always be growing. So I love that. I
Mm-hmm.
love that
Mm-hmm.
answer. And so, in terms of doing the work you do now, you mentioned that you're able to actually balance working a full time slash part time job, a full time
Mm-hmm.
job and your passion in terms of the work you do in music and
Mm-hmm.
in the arts and with your store. But was it always that way though? I mean, I'm sure there was a season you had to get to where you
Mm-hmm.
are now able to balance that more. Did you
Mm-hmm.
ever find a situation where you had,
Mm-hmm.
I recently wrote about a concept of work life realignment
Mm-hmm.
because people talk about work life balance a lot and they say, oh, I'm just balance my work and life. But is there truly a thing as work life balance? Don't you find that at certain phases in your life, some things need more of your time than others, and you just have to align
Mm-hmm.
it to what's your thought on that? You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
to be honest with you, I see it as just one entity. I
Mhm.
feel like my work, my personal life, my work, my music, even my 9 to 5, I see it as one because they're all intermingled. I don't go after trying to create a balance. I think the balance just happens because it's like I'm going to do what I'm going to do. Like like there are times that I'll have a meeting at work and I'll maybe need to attend to something with my customers and I'll be like I'll reschedule the meeting because if it's not high priority, because I have the inside scoop as to what's like, what's causing stoppage to business. If it's not causing stoppage to business and we can reschedule this meeting and I need to attend to my customers, I'm rescheduling the meeting. So basically, I think the balance for me happens because I've always seen it as one. I mean, how can you separate? How can you separate your art, your passion from your family, who is
Mhm.
also very, very important to you, number one in your life? And how do you separate that from work? Because if you don't have a job, of course, you can't really, like have the finances to
Function.
take care of your family. Yeah. So I just see it as one and I just glide through all the different decisions and scenarios I find myself in. And I'm always like, okay, I need to do all of this. I probably need to get 5 things done today. In balancing that, what is the high priority for me? Like what is the most important 3 that I can get done today? So the balance just happens. It just happens naturally for me. And I don't feel like I need to separate one from the other. I feel like it's just all just one big cohesive, um, thing that comes together. And I make it a point of duty to make sure that one, I don't sacrifice one for the other. Like I don't
Mhm.
sacrifice family for pursuing my dreams, and I also don't sacrifice pursuing my dreams for family, even though that might sound not so good. But yeah, yeah.
I really like that. The word that comes to mind was a word a friend of mine used called work life integration, where
Mhm.
work life
I like that too. Yeah.
and everything integrates and is free flowing and works seamlessly together. So I think you
Mhm.
just described that beautifully. Yeah, I like that a
Thank
lot.
you.
And, you just said something that you were like, okay, I hope people don't take controversially in terms of not wanting to give up your dreams for your family. But I actually I agree with that also, because I remember a time in my life when I wanted to make a decision and I just
Mhm.
thought, gosh, my kids are young. Maybe I need to wait. And I remember my husband mentioning to me that God has given you these kids to add to your life, to complement your
Mhm.
life, not to take away from your life. So don't let
Right.
them be the excuse that
Right.
you use not to move forward. So I definitely agree with
Mhm.
that. And I took that
Yes.
advice and I'm glad I did. So
Yeah.
here
I
we are.
remember you shared that. Yeah. I remember you
Yes.
shared that. And I've always remembered that story. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So, in terms of with your life, your
Mhm.
art, your business, is there any memorable story that you have in terms of something that you've had to overcome, something that's shaped you to be who you are today, or maybe have the perspective that you have today?
Hmm. The first thing that comes to mind, I was trying not to tell the story necessarily, but the first one that comes to mind, which is probably the biggest event that shaped my life, was when we moved to Nigeria to
Mm,
pursue my music career. And that definitely was a life changing experience.
mm,
Um, yeah, it definitely did change my perspective. Like you said, it changed my perspective big time because I think before I went to Nigeria, let me put it this way. I think I was pursuing fame. I was not able to realize the difference between fame and success.
mm,
And when we went there, it was all about, yes, we have to be famous, we have to be famous, we have to trend, we have to trend, we have to do this. And I realized that, God doesn't necessarily promise you fame. The Bible says your talent shall make way for you. He promises us success. He promises us that our talents will make way for us. It doesn't necessarily promise that we're going to be famous. And in trying to achieve that fame, I realized that fame is not necessarily from God. I'm sure there are people out there who are famous, who are a child of God, but the industry will have you do some things that a child of God has no business doing in order to achieve that fame. And after we had tried to like break in, there's so many instances, so many stories, which we don't have time for to get
mm,
into. But after pursuing that fame for a while, I realized that what, I'm okay. I don't need fame. I'm okay with just being successful,
mm,
and I'm okay with God blessing me with like blessing the work of my hands and reaping the fruit of my labor, and not necessarily associating that to fame. And we decided to hit the humble pie, and we decided to move back to the US, and that totally changed my perspective. Like I have so much content
mm,
being an independent artist. Like before I went to Nigeria, I would say that I used to maybe perhaps envious of people that were stars or had stardom, or people that were trending, or they were popular, or they were celebrities. But now I feel a sense of just content, because I know in many cases, at least in Nigeria, what some of these artists have to go through and do in order to achieve that. So I'm just like, oh, okay, I respect you, I admire you, I love your music, but I'm good. I'm good where I am. And I've just
mm,
learned to just embrace my success as an independent artist. And even though, and like I'll tell you one story. Like when I released self-affirmation project, there was one time that I went to this festival, and people kept telling me that somebody was looking for me. This lady was looking for me, and I was like, okay, who's this lady? I would go and they'll say, oh, you just missed her. And I'll go backstage and they say, oh, you just missed her. So eventually I was able to connect with her, and she was this lady. And she was walking with a cane. She looked kind of sickly. And then she told me that she's been looking for me, like she's been going around looking for me. She's actually been to a couple of my festivals, hoping to meet me, but she never had the opportunity. And she told me that the album changed her life. Like she said that she was on the verge
mm,
of. She said of course, she had cancer, but then she said she actually was thinking about committing suicide because the treatment, and she didn't have the finances to take care of, like the medical bills. So she actually wanted to take her life. And she told me that, the album really changed her life, and, saying those affirmations. And when I hear something like that, I mean, that was like perhaps the pinnacle of my success, because I felt like if I can release an album that saves just one person's life, I'm getting goosebumps right now. Then I feel
I
like
have
I've
goosebumps.
done
I have goosebumps
my
all
job
over.
as an artist. Yeah, I feel like I've then I feel like, you know what? Thank God that I can make that impact in somebody's life, you know?
Mm,
So yeah,
mm.
yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, that makes it worth it for me. So yeah, success is what I hold on to. Not the fame is like, oh, I don't need that. I'm good.
Wow. That story, Janelia, is powerful. I had goosebumps just hearing you say that. And there's just so much in that one story. I mean, I just want to unpack it a little bit because I always believe in this saying, live life without regret.
Mm,
And one of the things you mentioned is the fact that you and your family packed up from the comfort of your life here in the
mm,
United States and moved to Nigeria. And just put this in perspective, this is a situation whereby it's not like you've lived there in a while. It's not like your
mm.
kids have lived there or anything. It's like it's a very different life. But you
Right.
and your family made that decision to do that just to give you an opportunity to pursue
Mhm.
your musical career at the next level, right?
Right.
And even though it didn't quite happen the way you had anticipated in terms of fame and all that goes with that,
Mhm.
and even though someone might look at it and say, wow, she failed, she packed up, it didn't work, and she ran right back to the United States.
I never
You
saw it
know,
that way. Right.
but, but
Mhm.
first of all, let's put aside the story with that woman. The fact that you went at all, the fact that you did, could you imagine if you didn't do that? You would
Right.
always wonder, what if?
What
You
if?
would always
Exactly.
wonder, you would always wonder, like, you get what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Maybe
Yeah.
if I had done that, my career would have been here now. Maybe
Right.
because you would never have known all those little
Yeah.
details that you now got to know firsthand. That to
Yeah.
me right there is success because what you said
Thank
was
you. Yeah.
start, go, do it. And you did it. You know what I mean? So
Mhm.
when you hear a story like you just shared, having your music touch a no named woman that you would have never known or met and not known how it impacted their life, that just becomes icing on the cake.
Right. It definitely was. It was the, I, and
Powerful.
I've always like times, times that there are times that you get discouraged, I'm not perfect. There are times that I get discouraged. I'm like, oh gosh, I'm just sick of all of this. I feel like I'm, like wearing too many hats. I'm spreading myself too thin. I'm just going to give up, music or whatever. And at times that I feel like that. And this woman just always comes to mind. This woman always comes to mind that boy, you won't be able to touch people. You won't be able to have impact on people. And there've also been, different situations where I've met people who have told me, "Oh, your music, I love your music. Your music is inspiring." Blah blah blah. But I just always try to remind myself that there's a reason why I'm doing this. There's a reason why God has given me this particular platform to reach people in a different way, and that keeps me going. That keeps me motivated and just continue regardless of the obstacles.
Wow, I really love your sharing that story because Janelia, for those of us who have been watching you, from the sidelines, you are success through and through. Just even hearing the story you just shared only makes you more endearing because it goes to show that because a lot of times, we see the pictures, you see the
Mhm.
video, it looks all glamorous,
Glamorous,
but
yeah.
yeah, right? But one
Mhm.
doesn't always really know some of the blood, sweat, and tears that goes behind that to make
Yes.
that feasible and possible. And for you to keep going with that, with a bright smile like you always have, looking gorgeous like you always do. So
Thank
thank
you.
you. I really like that a lot. So
Sure.
let's just move on to the fact that you're a published author.
Mhm. So many
So
hats.
so many hats. And, share with us, like, when did you know it was time? And is it something you had always wanted to do?
Yes, ma'am. It's something I've always wanted to do. I actually have a plethora of notebooks, I should say, of just things that I write, from short stories to songs. I'm also a songwriter. Yeah. So, and I hesitated to launch my authorship career because I felt like, oh my gosh, why do I need to add another hustle to my life? I think I have enough hustle as it is. But I just felt like, you know what? I'm not getting any younger. Like why am I procrastinating this dream? It's something that I've always wanted to do. And the opportunity came when I discovered intermittent fasting and water only fasting. And I just felt like I needed to somehow document my experience. And that was actually the very first book that I wrote. It's titled Diary of My 5-Day Intermittent Fasting. I just felt like my story would again inspire somebody out there. Like my whole brand and of my everything that I do as an artist is just to inspire to, for greatness, for better, for you're going after your dreams, achieving your goals, being spiritual, just always inspire. So I felt like, you know what, I'm sure this story can probably impact somebody because not a lot of people know the amazing benefits of water only fasting. And I did extensive research, and I'm like, you know what, I think I can put this into a book. So for that was when I felt like it was time for me to step out as an author because I felt like I was telling like my truth. And I felt like what better way to launch, that career as to just sharing your truth. And then that led to, after that experience, I'm learning how to do that, getting good reviews, making some money. So I was like, okay, I can write more books. And that's how that got started.
Wow, I love that. That actually really inspires me personally because that's the next trajectory that I plan to launch into
Nice.
myself. And you definitely inspired me because I was like, listen, I've been thinking I'm going to do this. I've been putting it aside
Mhm.
and I was like, wait a minute, Janelia is doing this thing. I need to talk to her. And we had a conversation and
Yes, we
it just
did.
it got me fired up. I was like, okay. And that really also talks about the people we surround ourselves with, I think is really important.
Yes,
People that can
absolutely.
can inspire us and motivate us to do great things.
Hmm.
So thank you.
I'm glad I could be of assistance.
All right. So that is fantastic. So in terms of right now, are there any books that you're reading or you've read that have impacted you in terms of some of the things that you're doing or where you are on your journey right now that you would like
Hmm.
to share?
I actually like fiction. I know I'm a nonfiction author, but I actually like fiction. Like my favorite author is Octavia Butler
Hmm.
and that novel Wild Seed. I just like stories that take you beyond like the norm, like the
Hmm.
normal, 9 to 5, day to day, like sci-fi, like fantasy. That's a genre that I crave. Like whenever I watch movies or read a book, I just want to be transported away from all this craziness, and just enter into a different realm and imagine different things that aren't necessarily in existence right now in my universe. So that's, yeah. So nonfiction, sci-fi, Octavia Butler, I love her.
Okay.
And I've not read any sci-fi novels recently. Maybe like 2 years ago. But that is my cue to probably pick up a book one of these days and get back into that.
I actually love your answer. And I think it's very on brand for you, to be honest, because you're a
Mhm.
creative. You're a creative.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
of course, you're going to love something that's outside the norm and that's,
Yeah.
out there. So that's own it, girl. That's
Okay.
awesome.
Okay. Okay.
All right. So I can't let you go without asking you to share a little tidbit. And we've kind of heard a little bit already, but what makes you, Janelia Soul, distinctly you?
Hmm. There's so many things, but I think the one thing that probably stands out to people the most, because people always perceive you, no matter, like, regardless of how you want to project, you're always perceived by people. So based on that, I think the Afrocentric is what I think people perceive the most when they see me. Even I've had people who have kind of known me from a distance, and when they come closer, and it's happened several times where they'll make a comment like, oh, I thought this whole Afrocentric thing was just like, your brand. You guys really are Afrocentric when it comes to a house. Like, make them laugh. And then we do. Like children, they love them when you do it. We are very like, I feel like I'm kind of like a low-key girl that, got tushed because I grew up in Ibadan. And so the Afrocentric really makes me who I am. And even in my music. And I learned, let me tell you this, I learned that there's a market for it. Like a lot of times when we perform at these festivals, one of the reasons why we get selected to perform is because we're the only Afrobeat or African world fusion band that applied. So they want to have something different to their mix. And people always think, they always ask me, how are you able to get into this festival? You must have a really good agent. I'm like, no, nothing special. We're just an African band. And we're always the only African band in the lineup. So I learned that, that is also making way for me. So I don't have a desire to deviate from that. So Janelia is definitely the Afrocentric, girl that motivates and inspires. That's pretty much in a nutshell.
I love that. I love that. So what do you have coming up? And if our viewers want to get in touch with you, follow you, learn more about your music, your store, I see you're wearing your beautiful earrings. I should have worn mine. I should have worn mine because I got a pair. I got a pair.
Yeah, next time.
Yes, next time for sure. How can our viewers reach you?
Well, my social media, everything is JaneliaSoul. My website is also JaneliaSoul. I have two. The artist page is JaneliaSoul.com and the merch store is JaneliaSoul. That's store. What I have coming up, my son and I don't know if you know this, but my first son, Fifolua, has grown up to be an amazing drummer. So what's next for me is a collabo between my son and I, because I want to introduce him to my fans. Because I noticed that a lot of times when you start like these like homegrown businesses like Mary Kay, you always start from like your inner circle, like your friends and your family, and then you work your way out. So the goal of this project is to introduce him to my fans, because I have like 20-something thousand on my email list, and my fans engage with me really well. So the goal is to just put him out there so that they can discover who Fifolua is. And then beyond that, we'll see what happens. So look out for that. I'm working on the song right now, and we're planning like how we're going to produce it. And he's going to come up with a drum pattern. So it's going to be JaneliaSoul featuring Fifolu. Gosh, I hope I'm not like trying to sell my son here, but yeah, I think I'm trying to plug my son. But yeah, that's what's coming up next for me.
I absolutely love that. I remember when he was a baby, and just to see him as this young, talented man right now is amazing.
Super
so I'm
talented.
I'm going to be looking forward to that. Definitely we'll look forward to checking it out, and we'll put more information out and details on that as it comes up. So JaneliaSoul, thank you so much for being a guest today on Distinctly
Thanks for having me.
Really appreciate you.
Thanks for having me.